expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you
And welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bill Plante. The August employment figures were released today. The unemployment rate rose from 9.5% to 9.6%, but 67,000 new jobs were created in the private sector, and the president and his people spin this as good news because August marked the 8th month of job growth, as opposed to where we were last year, losing thousands or hundreds of thousands of jobs each month. Now, you can look at those numbers every which way, but there is no doubt that a huge number of Americans are struggling financially. And at the same time, any way you look at it, things are pretty good for members of Congress. And that's why Arizona Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick has introduced a bill which would reduce pay for members of Congress by 5%. Congresswoman Kirkpatrick joins me now from Phoenix. Welcome. And what kind of reaction? Sure. What kind of reaction are you getting to the idea of cutting your colleagues' salaries?
Well, there's nothing like asking the people you work with to take a 5% pay cut. Some people think it's a great idea. A lot of people are pretty angry at me. So I'm not very popular with my colleagues, but the American people get it. They think this is a great idea. Recent polls showed that 75% of Americans support this. And it would be the first pay cut bill in 77 years.
Yeah, they did it in 1933, didn't they? The height of the Depression.
That's right. That was the last congressional pay cut. We are in a huge economic downturn. I think it's time that Congress took a pay cut. We need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to show leadership. We need to listen to the American people.
Well, now, members of Congress, regular members, make $174,000 a year. A 5% cut would bring that down to a little more than $165,000. Now, for most Americans, I think that's still a lot of money. I mean, is it more than just...
It's a lot of money, and
is it more than just a token?
I get what you're saying. I mean, my last job, I made $24,000, so this is definitely the most money I've ever made, and I already give back 5% of my salary every month. So this week I was down in the town of Safford on the first of the month. I took out my checkbook, wrote my check, and dropped it off in the mailbox. And I'm asking my members, my colleagues and members of Congress to do the same thing, but I'm also asking that it be mandatory. I came up with this idea last Christmas. I was out shoveling snow with my neighbors, and they were telling me about pay cuts, furloughs, pink slips, and I said, you know, Congress should do the same thing. We should feel the same pain that the American people are going through right now.
Let me ask you this. Where does that 5% that you give back every month go?
It goes to the Bureau of Public Debt. There is actually a Bureau of Public Debt, and they will accept donations. And I think this is a start toward restoring fiscal balance and security for the American people. You know, let's get on board with this. I've asked the House Administration Committee to grant me a hearing. I've asked that this be included in the 2011 appropriation budget. Leadership doesn't get it. They're not listening to me, but I'm fighting for this every day.
Well, now, Congress has, as you said, not done this in many, many years. But if they do you think it's going to make any difference? Will people respond to this?
Absolutely. I mean, everywhere I go, people think this is a great idea. And as I said, the recent poll that came out just this week shows that 75% of Americans support this.
So Congress hasn't gotten a raise this year, and you're not getting one next year. But I guess we should say, because people probably don't realize, Congress doesn't vote to raise its own pay. It happens automatically, right? A cost of living adjustment.
That's right.
Even though it's not happening this year or next year.
And that's just not enough. I mean, I really, really think that we should take a pay cut. The American people, as you said, you just issued the jobs number. So many people are out of work. So many people have taken 100% pay cut because they don't have a job. So it's all about jobs and restoring the economy and getting folks back to work.
Well, why not take it a step further and make members of Congress vote to raise their pay? That hasn't happened in a long time.
I like that idea. I like that idea. I think we should go back to that. I don't think it should be automatic. I agree.
But look, I mean, as you've said at the very outset, this is not too popular with your colleagues. Is it likely that you'll ever get a hearing?
You know, I think that the poll this week will be heard. I mean, I really want Congress to listen to the American people, what they're saying, and listen. You know, they're saying, hey, times are tough. We're having to tighten our belt. You know, you need to feel our pain. So I'm hopeful that when I go back in mid-September that members of Congress will be receptive to this.
Well, I wish you luck on that, but I have to say, as a longtime Washington observer, I got to be a little bit skeptical that they're going to put this on the calendar.
Well, you know, a lot of times Washington doesn't listen to the American people, and it's time that they start listening. I'm going to fight for that.
Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick trying to reduce the salaries of members of Congress by 5%. Thanks so much for being with us on Washington Unplugged.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
All right, listen up. And now for something completely different. Today, Unplugged kicks off its new special series, Hot Ads of the Week. Hot Ads. Senior political producers Rob Hendin and Jill Jackson are going to join us each week to break down the good, the bad, and the downright ridiculous campaign ads that are going to be coming to you for the midterm elections. They'll be all over television very soon. You will find it hard to avoid them. So we will give you a heads up so that you can hit the mute button. Today, Rob Hendin joins us, and also the CBS News Director of Elections, Anthony Salvanto. And Rob, let's start with you with a campaign ad from Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, whom we just talked to.
Well, yeah, it's called Independent, and let's take a look at that now, Bill.
Okay.
If they don't pass this, you are taking the first step, right?
I am. I'm already giving 5% of my salary and dedicating it to the public debt. We need to restore some fiscal discipline and take responsibility.
Ann Kirkpatrick cut her own pay and is pushing to cut congressional salaries until they balance the budget. Even broke with her own party to oppose the Wall Street bank bailout. Independent, like Arizona.
I'm Ann Kirkpatrick, and I approve this message.
Rob, how do you parse that? What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting. We just had her on, Bill. You were talking to her about cutting her own pay, and now she's running an ad in Arizona. She's up for re-election. She's a Democrat, but you wouldn't know that from that ad. It starts off with her on Fox News, which is an interesting way to grab attention, and she says, I'm independent, just like Arizona, and it bucked her own party, but again, does not say that she is a Democrat. There's a lot of Democrats that are going to face tough election battle in Arizona, and she's one of them, and it's an ad. We've seen a lot of this around the country where Democrats who are in battle, they're not saying they're Democrats.
Right. It's just me. It's not me, the Democrat.
Yes.
All right, Anthony. She's the 1st District of Arizona. She won by 56% last time. Is she in trouble?
Maybe. You know, there's a lot of districts that the Democrats picked up in 2006 and 2008 when they made big gains in the House that tend to be a little more moderate, tend to be somewhat conservative, especially in a midterm election when the electorate does tend to get a little more moderate, a little more conservative. So it's maybe not surprising to see somebody try to portray themselves as an independent, and especially this year when Washington is so unpopular. Ratings of both parties are so unpopular, both the Republicans and the Democrats. So if she can get that independent label to stick, you can clearly see why she would go that way as a strategy.
Okay, now let's take a look at this ad from Baron Hill. He's seeking re-election for Congress in Indiana, and he uses some real Hoosiers to attack his opponent on Social Security and Medicare.
I'm Baron Hill, and I approve this message.
First this.
Social Security is a Ponzi scheme.
Now this. Todd Young thinks Social Security and Medicare are social welfare programs.
Welfare? I worked my whole life.
Money from every paycheck went to Social Security. That's not welfare.
That's not welfare. We earned it.
If Todd Young thinks Social Security and Medicare are welfare programs, will he fight to protect them or take them away?
Todd Young is not for us.
All right, trying to scare people, is that effective?
Well, it's trying to scare people with real people doing that. It's interesting. We've seen a lot of ads this week where if you don't trust your member of Congress, maybe you'll trust your neighbor. And so we have some real people from Indiana who are taking on Todd Young, who's the GOP candidate over Social Security, which is kind of the third rail of American politics, an oldie but a goodie in terms of an election year scare tactic. That if the Democrats can't win on what they're doing, don't vote for the Republican because they'll take away your Social Security. Trying to paint some of the Republican candidates as extremists on issues like the social welfare programs and the economy. And it's something we're seeing a lot of so far.
So, Anthony, with the Republicans apparently riding a tide at this point, is that going to help the Democrats?
This raises a really key point to watch this fall, which is the senior vote. Now, in a midterm election, typically you see a little bit of an increase in the proportion of seniors who are voting, maybe 3, maybe 4 points, maybe even higher this year. And seniors weren't terribly thrilled with the health care reform law when we polled on it throughout its passage. So here you see maybe going after the senior vote, trying to keep them in play. If you're a Democrat, certainly trying to win back maybe some of them. And particularly if you've got an opponent who is sort of on the Tea Party side of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly going to be one of the dynamics as well. This idea of being too extreme or out of the mainstream. You often see that in campaigns, and I'm not surprised to see some Democrats trying to paint some of the Tea Party and some of the Republicans in that light, just as oftentimes Republicans try to paint some Democrats as too liberal, out of the mainstream. All right, the final ad comes from the Club for Growth. That's a fiscally conservative political action committee, and they are taking on the Senate race in Pennsylvania, going after the Democrat candidate Joe Sestak.
It's very liberal to stick taxpayers with that $300 billion mortgage bailout. It's very liberal to vote for a massive energy tax that could kill jobs here. And it's very liberal to say that the $787 billion Obama-Pelosi stimulus plan should have spent even more. That's Joe Sestak's record. Very liberal. We can't afford Joe Sestak's liberal schemes in the Senate. Club for Growth Action is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Very liberal, eh? Scary?
Well, you just heard Anthony say that some Republicans are going to paint Democrats as extremists on the left. This ad from the Club for Growth uses the term liberal 6 different times. It's interesting because Sestak's opponent is a guy named Pat Toomey, who was the president of the Club for Growth when he was here in Washington. So the Club for Growth is a very pro-business, small government organization that is really going to be active in this race and a few other races like in California. And we're going to see a lot of these conservative organizations playing very hard in some of these elections, including Pennsylvania, primarily against Joe Sestak. And it's going to be something a lot of people are going to see, these outside issue groups coming in with ads.
Anthony, if the economy is the big issue, are the labels liberal and conservative going to mean anything? Well, look, the liberal label, or trying to tie someone to the spending, is certainly going to be one of the keys here for the Republicans. The stimulus wasn't necessarily popular, and there's going to be plenty of folks who think that it didn't work. So to the extent that you can tie any member of Congress, even if he's not the incumbent senator, to the stimulus package or to large government spending, certainly that's going to be a Republican theme. I won't be surprised to see that throughout in a lot of races. All right, Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much, CBS Director of Elections, and Rob Hendin, who is, what are you now?
I'm still your producer, Bill.
All right, well, that's good. That I like. But you have a new title.
Senior political
producer, along with Jill Jackson. Okay, now, finally, we've got a report on a gathering of geeks. They gather often, but last weekend, they gathered to celebrate the art form they love, comic books, at Baltimore's Comic-Con. And our Christina Ruffini braved the sea of devoted fans and a few superheroes along the way to bring us this report. Take a look.
They came from all over. Gotham City.
Hello, citizens of Baltimore.
Metropolis. Even a galaxy far, far away. United by their love of one thing.
I love comics.
The 11th annual Baltimore Comic Convention, or Comic-Con for those in the know, hit town this weekend, bringing with it a collection of characters as diverse as those on the pages of their beloved books. Some came to see their idols.
Spider-Man? I love Spider-Man.
Others to be the idol.
As a employee of the Department of Defense, I work in a little cubicle, and I'm just one of many people in a cubicle. Here at Comic-Con, I'm an icon.
The costume contest packed quite a pow. But the real action was on the convention floor, where fans could buy anything. T-shirts, glasses, artwork, action figures, and of course, comics, and more comics. They may not hold the same popularity they did at their height in the 1940s and 50s, but comic books are still big business, pulling in more than $400 million in the U.S. last year alone. And the comic book industry is not just for the boys.
I just couldn't resist.
As more women and minorities get drawn into the pages, the plots, and the joy of collecting.
It's still a male-oriented field, but of course the females are always welcome.
Though some may cringe at the prospect of spending a Sunday with overgrown kids in their comic books, perhaps feeling like a kid is the best part.
For CBS News, I'm Christina Ruffini in Baltimore.
All right, Christina, thanks very much, and thank you for watching Washington Unplugged. Join us every day here on CBSNews.com. I'm Bill Plante. Have a great holiday.